Downstream. Miles woke to the sound of water. Not the drip of a leaky faucet or the rush of pipes in the walls, but the gentle, persistent murmur of flowing water. A river sound. The kind he remembered from childhood camping trips, sleeping in a tent near a stream, lulled by its constant voice. He opened his eyes and saw his ceiling, the familiar water stain in the corner that looked like a map of Italy. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the room. Everything seemed normal. Everything was as it should be, except for the sound of water. He sat up and looked toward his bedroom door, which stood open to the living room beyond. Through it, he could see sunlight, brighter than the indirect glow coming through his own window. And movement. Almost like the play of light on moving water. Miles got out of bed slowly, his feet finding the floor, which felt strangely cool and slightly damp. He walked to the doorway and stopped. There was a river running through his living room, not a flood or a burst pipe, or some water covering the floor. An actual river, maybe 15 feet wide, flowing from his kitchen through the living room toward the wall where his TV had been. It had banks. Earth and grass sloped down to the water's edge. Small rocks lined the shallows. The current moved steadily, purposefully, as if it had somewhere to be and had been traveling there for centuries. Trees grew along the banks, not houseplants or decorative ferns, but real trees, willows and cottonwoods, with their branches dipping toward the water. Sunlight filtered through leaves that shouldn't exist, creating patterns of light and shadow on the current. The air smelled of water and earth and green, growing things. His couch was gone. His coffee table, his bookshelves, his TV, all of it replaced by riverbank and flowing water. Through the trees, he could see what might have been distant hills or clouds or nothing at all. The space of his apartment had somehow expanded to contain all of this, or else the river had brought its own space with it. He stood in the doorway for a long time, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His rational mind offered explanations. A dream, a hallucination, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning or black mold. Some kind of psychotic break brought on by stress or exhaustion, or the undiagnosed brain tumor that had been waiting all this time to announce itself. But the river didn't feel like any of those things. It felt real. He could hear the specific sound of water moving over rocks, could see individual leaves trembling in a breeze that he couldn't feel, could smell the green scent of riverbank vegetation. If this was a hallucination, it was the most complete and detailed one ever created by a failing mind. He walked into the living room, his bare feet finding the carpet for a few steps and then touching grass. The transition was seamless. One moment, he was on synthetic fiber, the next on cool, damp earth. He knelt and touched the grass, pulled up a blade, and examined it. Real. Ordinary. The kind of grass that grew anywhere water and sun coincided. The river flowed past him, completely indifferent to his presence. He could see the bottom through the clear water, could see small fish darting in the shallows, their scales catching the sunlight. Everything about this was impossible, of course, but everything about this was real. "David!" he called, his voice strange in the open air. His roommate should have been home. David worked from home on Thursdays, was always in his room on video calls by this time of morning. But there was no answer. And when Miles looked toward where David's bedroom door should have been, he saw only more riverbank, more trees, the space reconfigured by whatever logic governed apartment rivers. He tried his own bedroom. When he walked back through the doorway, he found his room exactly as it had been. His bed was unmade, and clothes were on the floor. The window showed the familiar view of the building across the street. He went to the window and opened it, or tried to. It wouldn't budge. He tried the door to the hallway, turned the knob, pulled, pushed. Nothing. It was as if the door had been painted on, a decoration rather than a functional exit, like when that cartoon coyote painted a railroad tunnel on the side of a mountain. Except in those cartoons, the roadrunner always managed to go through the tunnel, he thought. Miles went back to the living room, to the river. It continued flowing, patient and eternal, waiting for nothing. He looked for his phone, remembered it was in his bedroom, went back, and found it on the nightstand. No signal, The time showed 8:47 a.m., but when he checked again a few minutes later, it still showed 8:47. The clock had stopped, or time had, or something else was happening that made clocks irrelevant. He tried to leave again. This time he walked to where his apartment door should have been and found only more riverbank. He followed the wall, looking for any exit, any boundary between his apartment and the outside world. But there were no boundaries anymore. Just river and trees and the suggestion of distance in every direction. The panic, when it came, was brief but intense. He was trapped. Something impossible had happened, and he was trapped in his own apartment that wasn't an apartment anymore, that had been replaced by or transformed into or revealed to actually be something else entirely. He paced along the riverbank, breathing hard, trying to think of what to do, who to call, how to escape. But the river kept flowing, and gradually its sound worked on him the way it had when he was a child. The steady murmur of water over stone, the peaceful indifference of the current that had been moving before he was born and would continue long after he was gone. His breathing slowed. His heart rate dropped. The panic faded into something else. Not acceptance exactly, but a lessening of resistance. He sat on the bank and looked at the water. It was beautiful. That was the thing his panic had prevented him from noticing. The river was genuinely, impossibly beautiful. The way the light caught the current. The perfect clarity of the water. The fish moving through it with unconscious grace. The trees swaying in a breeze that existed in their world but not quite in his. He found himself remembering the river from his childhood. Not any specific river, really, but the idea of rivers, the archetype. The camping trips with his father before the divorce. Sitting on rocks and watching the water flow past, feeling the strange comfort of moving water. The way it made everything else seem less urgent. His father had told him something about rivers once. Something about how they were always the same and always different. How you could never step in the same river twice because the water was always new, but the river remained. This river felt familiar in that same archetypal way. As if every river he'd ever seen had been preparing him for this one. As if this were the river all others had been copying. Without consciously deciding to, he took off his socks and waded in. The water was warm, not hot, not cold, but exactly the temperature of comfort, of welcoming. It flowed around his ankles with gentle insistence, tugging slightly, inviting him deeper. The current wasn't strong enough to knock him down, and it wasn't dangerous. It was just there, constant and patient, and going somewhere. Miles stood in the shallows and felt the water's pull. Not physically, though that was there too, but something else. A sense that the river knew where it was going, and that where it was going was where he needed to be. That sounds insane, he thought, but the thought felt distant, unimportant. What mattered was the water and the light and the steady flow toward somewhere downstream. He waded in deeper. The water reached his knees, his thighs, his waist. It was perfectly clear, and he could see his legs distorted by refraction, could see the bottom covered in smooth stones that were easy to walk on. The trees arched overhead now, creating a canopy that filtered the light into a green-gold glow. Something floated toward him from upstream. It was a boat. Small, wooden, the kind of rowboat you'd find at a summer camp or a lake rental place or an old-timey oil painting. It had a single seat and a pair of oars resting inside. No name was painted on the side. No registration number. No sign of ownership. Just a boat, appearing exactly when it was needed, as if the river had provided it. The boat bumped against his hip gently, then held position in the current as if waiting. Miles looked at it for a long moment. He could wade back to shore, return to his bedroom, and try again to find a way out. Could refuse this obvious invitation. He could resist, but he was tired. He realized that all at once, with a completeness that went beyond physical exhaustion. He was tired of resisting, tired of trying to control everything, tired of the constant pressure of living in a city that never stopped demanding more. He'd been tired for years, maybe. Had been running on empty, going through the motions, pretending everything was fine while something in him slowly wore away. The river wasn't demanding anything. It was just flowing. Just going where it was going and offering to take him along. Miles climbed into the boat. It rocked gently, settled, and accepted his weight. The oars were there, but he didn't reach for them. He didn't need to. The current caught the boat immediately, turned it, and began carrying it downstream. He trailed his hand in the water as the boat moved. The riverbank slid past, trees and grass and light, an endless procession of beauty that required nothing from him except his presence. He wasn't afraid. He vaguely thought that he should have been, probably. Should have been terrified by all of this, by the impossibility and the strangeness and the fact that he was in a boat floating through his apartment toward an unknown destination. But fear felt very far away. What he felt instead was curious, peaceful, like someone about to discover something important, something he'd been moving toward his whole life without knowing it. The river widened and the trees thinned. Ahead he could see what might have been an ocean or a lake or just more river. It was impossible to tell. The light was changing, becoming softer, more diffuse. The boat moved steadily forward, carrying him toward whatever came next. Miles lay back in the boat and looked up at the sky. It was blue and perfect, and seemed to go on forever. He felt the gentle rock of the current, heard the water's murmur, smelled the green scent of rivers and growing things. His eyes grew heavy. The warmth and comfort and motion lulled him. He let them close, just for a moment, just to rest. The river carried him on. David found him in the morning, or what felt like morning, though time had become strange. He'd come home late from his girlfriend's place and had gone straight to bed, hadn't noticed anything wrong. But when he woke, and Miles didn't respond to texts, when he knocked and got no answer, he'd opened the door. Miles was lying on the living room floor, on his back, his arms at his sides. He looked peaceful. He could have been sleeping except for the absolute stillness, except for the way his skin had gone gray, except for the way he clearly wasn't breathing. David called 911 with shaking hands. The EMTs arrived within minutes, went through the motions even though it was obvious, even though Miles had been gone for hours. A heart attack, probably. Or an aneurysm, something sudden and quiet that had taken him in the middle of the night. He'd walked into the living room and collapsed. That's what it looked like. The police came and asked their questions. David answered them, numb and disbelieving. His roommate was 28. Healthy, went to the gym, didn't smoke. How did someone that young just die? But it happened. The human body was fragile. Things went wrong. The EMTs were sympathetic but matter-of-fact. They'd seen it before and would see it again, probably before the end of their shift. They covered Miles with a sheet and prepared to move him. That's when David noticed the floor. The carpet around Miles's body was damp. It wasn't soaked, just damp, like a heavy morning dew on grass, like someone had walked through water and brought it with them. He mentioned it to the police. They examined it, took notes, and probably put it down to condensation or a spill or something that didn't matter. People see things when they're in shock. They imagine details that explain the inexplicable. But after everyone left, after they'd taken Miles away and David was alone in the apartment, he went back to the living room. He touched the damp carpet. It smelled like river water, like earth and growth and moving, living things. He couldn't explain that, and didn't really try. He just stood there in the empty apartment, in the space where his roommate had died, and thought about rivers and the way they carried things away. Downstream, always downstream, toward something no one living could name.